fine.
We are live.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Richard Kubek, and I'm honored to be the chair of Abraham's Table of Long Island, and I welcome you to this program. It's the fourth in an unfortunate series.
We are live.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon, everybody.
My name is Richard Kubek, and I'm honored to be Abraham's Table of Long Island, and I welcome you to this program. It's the fourth in an unfortunate series.
We are live.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name
Good
is
afternoon, everybody. My name is Richard Kubek, and I'm honored to be
Abraham's Table of Long Island, and I welcome you to this program.
So some of our panelists have their YouTube open. If we could ask them to close their YouTubes.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Richard Kubek, and I'm honored to be Abraham's Table of Long Island, and I welcome you to this program.
So some of our okay, Richard, you can start.
Had some technical issues there. Good afternoon again, everybody. My name is Richard Kubek. I'm honored to be chair of Abraham's Table of Long Island, and I welcome you to this, what is a fourth program in an unfortunate series that we would rather have not hosted. It's a series on the problems that we have all confronted over the past year with a variety of causes. Let me take us back to December of 2019. We had a program live in person on gratitude, how Jews, Christians, and Muslims view gratitude. And during that program, a number of people said, how can we be grateful in difficult times? We had no idea what was ahead of us in December of 2019. By the end of January, we were on the verge of a catastrophic global pandemic, followed by an economic collapse, the worst since the Great Depression, followed by racial unrest, the worst in 50 years, followed by one of the most divisive periods in American political history and one of the most polarized presidential campaigns ever. And so in March of 2020, we hosted a program on how our faiths, Jewish, Christian, and Muslim traditions could help us cope at that time with COVID. And that led to some conversation around prayer. Do we pray during crises? So we had a third program, and that program was related to why we pray. And that sort of begged the title of tonight's program, which is how do we find internal peace and happiness? And so we welcome you to this program. Peace is very fundamental to all three faiths. Historically, Jews, Christians, and Muslims greeted one another with the term, peace be with you. Jews and Muslims still do. Christians have this as part of their liturgical experience. So peace is fundamental, and so is happiness, and they're connected. And so we hope tonight to see the connection and see how we can find peace and happiness as people of faith in this very troubled time that we live in. So I'm pleased now to introduce our moderator, Dr. Raymond Russo, and he will introduce our panel and give some opening remarks. Ray, go ahead.
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the table of Abraham's Table. And my name is Ray Russo, and I'm a member of Abraham's Table from Our Lady of Miraculous Medal in Wyandanch. As Richard has said, no one has to really remind you that this has been a chaotic year like no other in recent memory. We've gone through the global pandemic. It took hundreds of thousands of lives and is still taking thousands of lives. And it has affected jobs, education, lifestyles, and so much. It has been a time also of unfortunate racial unrest and deep political divisions and social divisions among people. In light of this, we are pleased to present a topic, a timely topic called How Do We Attain Internal Peace and Happiness in a Troubled Time, as seen through Jewish, Christian, and Muslim perspectives. We are very fortunate to have three distinguished panelists who will represent their religious perspective. First of all, representing the Jewish perspective is Rabbi Sheila Golaboy, Program Coordinator of the Suffolk Y Community Center. And representing the Muslim perspective is Imam Ibrahim Sayer from the Boston Children's Hospital.
And we're waiting
for the appearance of Father Ron, okay? And maybe he is floating his way over here. We will begin our discussion, and I must note that there will be some questions and that we should try to keep the dialogue on this point down to 5 minutes. And also when you ask a question or you answer one, to get right to the point if you can. How does your tradition define both interior peace and happiness? How do peace and happiness relate to each other? I'm going to start with Rabbi Golaboy to begin this discussion. Nasty, isn't it?
She has to unmute.
Unmute.
Oh, much better. I've muted.
Welcome
Okay.
to the world.
Sorry. Thank you. So yeah, the rabbi usually goes first because we have some of the earlier texts, of course, that we rely upon daily. We share those texts as well. But the question is, how do we define this internal or interior peace as well as interior, and as well as happiness in Judaism? And it's interesting because there are texts from every cultural influence from biblical times forward that all help us for that time kind of add a twist or a new perspective onto this idea of peace and happiness, as it relates to our times. So right now, as has already been mentioned, we are having this series because it is a unique time in our world. It's a time when people might start to question, when people might be wondering how to get that happiness or re-attain it, and where their faith might be able to support or lead them. So in Judaism, there's a lot to be said for humility. And there are many passages, but this idea of the person who's happy, the person who is mighty or even wise, is the person who is content with what he or she has. So it's a little bit about knowing that what you have, if that is the case, is good enough, or something that if you can learn to be content with, and if you can learn to appreciate, then the happiness will stay with you. So as we know, we often say, count your blessings, right? So count your blessings is another way of saying, what are the blessings that we hold on to, even when we're isolated, even when we might be feeling the effects of the economy, even when we're separated from loved ones. And even when, especially maybe when we start to get that feeling that it's going to turn around and we're just kind of waiting for the whole thing to open up again. So being content with what we have is one way of being happy. But happiness isn't enough, because we also learn that in Judaism, we have something called Yetzer Hara, which literally kind of means the evil that's created with us, or some people say it's the evil intention, but we shouldn't take it too literally, because the rabbinic sages 2,000 years ago contrasted like, okay, there's happiness, and then there's this evil inclination. But then they say if there weren't an evil inclination, a person would never build a house or start a family or get a job. So there's a little bit of mixed feeling about this idea of what I like to phrase as what I like to consider ambition. So ambition shouldn't overwhelm us, and it shouldn't lead us to do bad things. But at the same time, if we're just content with what we have now, if we don't have some ambition, some drive towards more things that can be fulfilling and happy, then that's not okay as well. Or at least we're allowed to have that ambition. We're allowed to have that drive. Which brings me to the definition, or how we look at peace. Because in Judaism, peace, both internal and external, it's the word shalom that many people are familiar with. In Hebrew, the word shalom actually doesn't mean peace in and of itself. It actually, the root form of it means completion or wholeness. So, so when you're asked somebody, how are you? Or what is the peace with you? Almost literally, if you were to translate it, you're asked like, how is your wholeness? How is your feeling of completion, of being whole? And so what we've learned is that that's the thing we should drive toward. This idea of shlemut, this idea of shalom, of peace, and happiness is an important part of it. And happiness can often be gained by humility, by kind of being content, finding contentment with where you are. But at the same time, we're allowed to be ambitious. We're allowed to set goals, to have drives as well. And so those two together really are what adds up to this whole sense of peace in Jewish tradition.
Thank you very much, Rabbi. And Imam Ibrahim, could we hear how the Muslim perspective can work on this question of peace?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. I have to underline first, whatever I'm about to say is going to be my perspective, what I understand from Islam. What Islam tells me about like peace, inner peace, and that's what I understand. And I cannot say this is the Islamic perspective 100%, and because someone else may have a totally different, outcome from the resources that they are receiving from the Muslim resources. As a rabbi stated, a similar thing for like the Islamic perspective. We have the word salam. It's like the Arabic word for shalom. And as a matter of fact, in Muslim tradition, one of the names of God, as you know, God have many names in Islamic tradition. Most famous of them, like 99. And one of them is the name of salam. So God is peace. And according to traditions, God is the source of peace. So that is one of the reasons why Muslims do their daily prayers. We call salah or namaz 5 times a day. After they finish their mandatory prayers, they say, Allahumma anta salam wa minka salam. It means that, oh God, you are the peace, anta salam wa minka salam, and peace is from you. So therefore, so finding inner peace has a lot to do with finding God, which is faith. So in short, I might say, so faith, according to Islamic tradition, has a lot to do with inner peace and happiness. And those who have inner peace are happy. I think, to me, that is the connection. So if I have to summarize, I cannot say it all, the resources, what hadith, what Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, says, and all the verses from Quran. I cannot say that in 5 minutes, but I can sum up all of these traditions under one sentence and say, to me, again, I cannot say this is the Islamic perspective. This is what I understand, what Quran or what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says regarding inner peace and finding peace. To me, it is the ability to see the beauty in everything. the ability to be able to see the beauty in everything. Because in Islamic tradition, everything that has been created is beautiful. Whether by itself it is beautiful like flowers, or as a result, even like the creation of the evil, like the Satan himself is beautiful. Because of him that we know like who is good, who is bad. So we can identify like bad people from good people because of him. So therefore, if you are able to see the beauty in everything, that is the key. So what do you need to know? What do you need in order to use that key? In Islamic terms, it is called ma'rifah, which means the knowledge. Knowledge of God and knowledge of self. There are two types of knowledge. And scholars say, "Man arafa nafsa faqad arafa rabbah," meaning that those who do know their own selves can know God. So self-knowledge is the first, like the fundamental in order to know God. So therefore, in order to like figure out what's going on, for example, for those who are really those of us who have little children, they're really, if they're really afraid of the thunderstorm, yes, it is something scary at look, but when we explain to them, as a matter of fact, it brings rain, and as a matter of fact, this kind of like beautiful thing happens. That's why we have flowers. If you can explain, give the proper knowledge, then the fear will go away, and that you can make peace with the thunderstorm. So therefore, here is another, maybe can be another like definition of peace or inner peace. To me is, as a human being, finding the right balance with our relationship with God and the creation. If we can figure out the right balance and the right, how can I say, definition of who we are in terms of our relationship with God and creation, then maybe we can find like inner peace. Oh, that's why I'm here. Oh, that's what's happening. If we are able to explain to ourselves first, and then so that's another thing that I can say. For the last last thing maybe I can say is there is a stage, spiritual stage, that is mentioned in Quran, which is called rida. It means that God is content. God is, how can I say, satisfied with you. And the exact word is radiyallahu anhum wa radu an. God is content with them. God is satisfied with them, and they are satisfied with God. So there is both like a satisfaction. And he says, God says, ذَلِكَ لِمَنْ خَشِيَ رَبَّهُ, and this is for those who have khashya. Khashya is the fear of knowledge, meaning that, for example, you figured out who God is, you figured out the power of God. It is the awe of God through knowledge. That is the reason of rida, and then you just submit yourself, and which we call Islam. So therefore, you don't have any problem that happened, any problem with God anymore about what's happening around you. Let me just stop over here. So there are a lot to say, so that we can continue and underline.
Thank
Just
you.
opening the door. Yeah.
I feel inspired right away by both of these people and how they have explained what is a mystical connection here, peace and happiness. And I'm going to turn to Father Ron and ask him if he wants to answer the question, how does your tradition define both peace and happiness? How do peace and happiness relate to each other?
He's muted. You're muted,
Muted.
Ron.
Ron, you're muted. Muting. Where is the unmute?
You unmute at the bottom of the screen.
The bottom of the screen,
Yeah.
there's an unmute. Bottom of screen.
Father, first touch the screen. On the left side of your screen, there is going to be a mute and unmute button. Yeah, first. Yeah. Oh, if it's a computer, then you have to click it. Yes, you're on.
What an irony to be this afternoon speaking about peace and happiness and being 15 minutes late. I'm totally peaceful at the present moment. I apologize, and I'm happy to be with all of you. I think, Ray, to the question that you raised, I don't think in our tradition that it's possible to define. I think you used the word define peace and happiness, and the idea of a definition seems to be a closure. And I don't think that anybody's got a handle on necessarily peace or happiness. I think we try to understand dimensions of these things. That's the first thing that I would say. The second is that the Catholic Catechism, that was an effort one of our popes put together some years ago. And looking at that instrument, I noticed that there's a the church makes a connection between peace and justice. Peace and justice. It's an interesting thing. I was somewhat surprised. Where do we come into justice? How does that relate? There was a bumper sticker in the late 60s and 70s. If you want peace, work for justice. If you want peace, work for justice. Justice has to do with right relationships. And all of our traditions, I believe, have moments where we try to rectify or bring our hearts into harmony with God. The Yom Kippur, and I think the time of Ramadan is an encouragement. Lent for Christians is a time to get our relationships straightened out. But the idea that in that effort, that it has a side effect of peace strikes me as a very good thing. And concomitant with that, to a degree, I think there can be happiness. Now, I'm not a good example this afternoon because I was absolutely terrified, not succeeding. So I'm a bit embarrassed that I'm not a good exhibit. But I think that's what I have learned from Catholicism. If you want peace, work for justice. And finally, there was also a poster that came out in the 60s and 70s, and it said, the truth will set you free, but sometimes it puts you through a ringer, really puts you through a ringer. So it doesn't always feel good, but if we're working towards justice and truth, there can be a concomitant gift of peace and happiness. I'll leave it at that.
Well, thank you. Very, very good to remember some of those words. Now, we could move on, but let me ask if you see that the world is moving away from peace and justice. Do you think that we need something to turn our attention to peace and justice, where it seems that most of the time we're just looking to gather wealth and power and not gathering peace and justice? Anyone want to comment on that? It wasn't that hard a question, was it?
Well,
Somebody better answer. They're going to have to stay after school.
I'll take a stab at it first. It's a good question, but it's also a very big generalization. It's hard to say the world is doing this or that at any period in time, because even the fact that there are wars in every period of time means that there are different approaches and different values. I do know that right now, a lot of people have taken the time to celebrate the good that is being done. So if it seems like there is more of the opposite in the world right now, it only takes to open the newspaper that people are going out of their way to help others, and people are going out of their way to let us know about it. When I was a kid, we were taught, well, good things don't make the news as often as bad things do, right? You don't hear about every time something good happens in a neighborhood, but you hear about the crime in the neighborhood, for instance. And, what we're seeing now is that people are really giving what they can. People who were at home looking for something to do, if they weren't able to work, if they didn't have a job, they were trying to help others in the situation. There really was I've seen a communal empathy. It doesn't mean that we have no more crime, and it doesn't mean that there aren't people who are just, feeling calloused and injured by life and not necessarily reaching out. But we do see a lot of opportunity and a lot of people taking the opportunity to do good and to model good, and some pretty amazing things that have happened locally, nationally, internationally, as far as how we support each other, how social support systems have grown. Even the values that are some politicians are kind of expressing at this moment are things that we might not have heard pre-pandemic. So if we're talking about these troubled times, I think we do have to see the good that came out of it. Not that anyone sent these times, or any God sent these times to us in order to see that, but that sometimes adversity does bring out the best in us individually and then as a community.
I think that is true. I think that when you have crises like we have now, it's possible that that spurs people on to look for a way of healing the crisis. And we see a lot of instances of that, even young teenagers, jumping into measures that will help people who don't have enough food. And you see it all over, even on Long Island. People just getting up and saying, I want to help. Here's what I can do. And I think that Sheila is correct in pointing that out. Anybody else want to point out? Father Ron?
I think that as I think Dick had alluded to earlier, we've gone through a terrible year. I mean, this was an incredibly painful year, and yet at the same time, there was it became an occasion for celebrating the lives of very humble human beings, the people who clean the floors in the hospitals, the sanitation workers picking up our garbage. There was just so many instances of beginning to appreciate what we take for granted, what we've taken for granted. And I think a number of us found happiness in all of that. Am I still on? Yes, thank you. A number of us found happiness in those things, and we're encouraged ourselves to do things that were uncomfortable, wearing the mask for so long, and yet realizing that maybe the way towards peace and towards happiness is not just thinking about myself, but that, as Dr. Fauci has said over and over again, we're a community. We're a community. And I would just speak very briefly of Pope Francis. I mean, he's so determined to help us to understand we don't go it alone, and nobody achieves great success without the help of others along the way. So I think this year has been very difficult for us, but I think many of us have begun to understand I have to give myself. I can't be just a taker. Leave it at that.
That's right. That's very true. And I think that comes from having to face a crisis. And we faced it. It was terrible while we were facing it. And we're facing it. We're coming out stronger. We're going to appreciate more about our life. And I think we're going to appreciate God more, because we're going to need him more. We're going to need him more when these crises occur. Imam, do you have a point?
Yeah, thank you. I'd like to say a couple of things. Yeah, since we are in the month of Ramadan, as you know, Islamic tradition, fasting according to Islamic tradition means like restraining from eating, from drinking, from sexual activities, basically whatever we have defined as a pleasure in this world. So we are trying to refrain ourselves. But there is another fasting process going on for 1.5 years almost right now. So we are social fasting as a world. We are fasting from each other. So I included in my du'as, in my prayers, that we are socially fasting from each other, and we missed each other so much, our community so much. I missed my Friday prayers, and like rabbis miss their gatherings on Saturdays, and I'm sure in every tradition. So we really like missed like each other. So That's one of the thoughts that brought into my mind into this holy month of Ramadan, realizing that we are actually fasting, socially fasting from each other for more than a year right now. And God is maybe helping us or making us longing each other. So now we realize just having a cup of coffee with my friend was a great blessing. Now that we realize that. Being able to go to the church and hugging somebody was a great blessing. Now we are realizing that. And now God is, that is how I interpret, putting mask into our mouths, telling that, so you may give virus to your community, and you may get virus, something bad from your community. So God is teaching us how to protect each other. And sometimes it is by not saying anything, by silencing, putting mask into our mouth. And sometimes it is just keeping our distance. So that's to me, like keeping the social justice and social peace. That was like there were a lot of like great teachings in this season for those who are able to see. As a chaplain who works in the hospital, it really hit me hard, because I have seen people who do not have anyone. The loved ones are not allowed to come to the hospital, and they are dying alone. And I have been many times the one who is holding the hands of those who are dying. The loved ones cannot be there. So I don't have like definition for the moments that we have experienced. Yes, it is tough time, but at the same time, I really, really hope that something good will come out of it. For hospitals, already did. Like the other viruses just vanished, so we don't have virus sicknesses anymore in the hospital. So because we are being so careful about what's going on. And as a last thing, maybe I can say is that if I have learned something from the interfaith gatherings that I have been doing for so many years, maybe 15, 20 years, I'm one of the founding members of Peace Islands Institute. I lived in Manhattan, in New York for 5 years. One thing that I have, if there is one thing that I have learned, is that there is good people and bad people. Doesn't matter what tradition, there are good people and bad people. And what we are trying to do is to gather people around goodness and good people. And I think this period showed us and helped us to see the goodness inside the people, how good can come together. So I should just leave it here and see where Raymond is going to take us.
You know, just the very fact that we have this organization. We did not have this organization 10 years ago. We looked at each other from the other side of the street. And thanks to Dick and several other people, we reached out to Rabbi Goloboy and her people. They have been fantastic in helping us. They have given us their building. We've had meetings there. We've had attempts at conventions there. The same is true of Mehmet, whom we didn't know. Here he is out there in Ronkonkoma. Who is this guy? Comes in and he starts to give us his knowledge about computers. Oh, you know, and where'd he get it all? Then he comes on Ramadan and he brings the food to us so we can have a dinner. So we began to see the other side of religion, that there are good people, wonderful people who want to be with us and want us to be with them. And that was a very important lesson you can never learn. Because when I grew up, I was taught, unfortunately, that there's only one true religion. No one can get me to say that now. I think all our religions have something to offer. And I'll never think of one true anything anymore. So, I'd like to ask you to comment on a couple of words that struck me as I was preparing for this discourse. And what I want to say is, how have each of you personally achieved peace and happiness through the faith life that your religion proposes? Personal. This is an personal answer here.
I'll take a whack at that. In the course of my time in the priesthood, we were exposed to a variety of forms of prayer, of how to pray. That was a central part of the gospel. Jesus taking his disciples aside and the disciples, his followers, saying, "Lord, teach us how to pray." And from that came the Our Father. Well, the tradition within Catholicism is very broad and varied in terms of types of prayer. Maybe the outstanding person, one of the outstanding people would be Saint Ignatius Loyola. And the Jesuits the Jesuits are the followers of Saint Ignatius. A particular type of prayer that became attractive to me as we were given this menu of how to pray and types of prayer was the Benedictines, and what is called today meditation, but is also in our tradition called contemplation. And it has to do with breathing, being very attentive to breathing. And it's a popular thing in many ways today, not necessarily from a religious or a spiritual or a religious point of view. So like this afternoon, as I was panicking, trying to get into our program, I kept saying it was breathe in, breathe out, which is like a mantra, I guess. But it's interesting. I do it every day. I take a section of scripture. I read it slowly. I think about it. I chew on it. What is it saying to me? Then I talk to God and from my heart about it. God, I lack this, or I'm not living this. It sounds right, but I'm not doing it correctly.
Being on time?
That's nasty.
Sorry.
We also have confession.
Yes.
Anyway.
And penance.
Absolutely. Anyway, but an interesting thing, and then the last step is not to say anything, that I've spoken to you, God, would you speak into my heart, not my head, but would you speak into my heart? And that's where just slowing down and breathing and being quiet. And I know that's not just a Catholic thing. Many traditions have this. But one thing, if I could just say make another point. A few years ago in the parish, I began to use that type of prayer, calling together a group of people from the parish and the area to look at Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter. And obviously that's a toxic topic for a number of people. And my thought was, why don't we get into our discussion about Black Lives Matter, look at ourselves. Do I have a history of racism? I do. Does it continue in spaces? It does for me. But then taking the upcoming scripture, the upcoming gospel, reading it, digesting it, chewing on it as a group, praying as a group. We would go at things hot and heavy, but praying together, and then just being silent, letting God, through this breathing, speak to our hearts. We've done this for 5 years. And I have to say, it has changed it has begun a change in my life. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Father. That was very nice. Okay. All right. Do I get any demerits for picking on you? I hope not. Okay. Dick, you want to? Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, I can go next. I mean, if no one is taking. That's actually how can I say, a tough one. I'm not gonna jump up here and say that I found my inner peace. So that's maybe I can be on the way to find my inner peace. So I cannot claim that I find my inner peace. Yeah, I'm hoping that I'm on the way. But what helped me is I have to go back maybe like 25, 30 years back. After my graduation from the Faculty of Theology, and I went to a special high school, also called like Imam and Khatib, Imam and Preacher High School. In those days, you were you can become an ordained Imam in Turkey. And I also like studied in the Faculty of Theology. And after my graduation, actually it happened here in the United States, I literally asked myself, are you a really believer or not? Do I really believe what I've been told so far from my childhood? Am I really a believer in that or not? Or am I just like following the footsteps of my forefathers? So I have decided to make an extensive reading after the age of 27, including Quran and Hadith collection. And the collection is called Risale-i Nur, which belongs to Bediüzzaman Said Nursi of Turkey. And I, how can I say, approved every faith that I thought I believed. I have it approved into my heart, into my mind. Then I said, yes, I'm a believer in afterlife. Yes, I'm a believer in this. So I had to confirm my faith, all the things that I used to say that I believe. After that confirmation, I really find inner peace within me. I hope that I found. What gives me peace right now is that only like knowing that there is somebody, God, existence of God is a source of peace for me. Knowing that He is just is a source of peace for me. knowing that like there is an afterlife in this life, because there is 100% justice. God is promising justice under 100%, but the 100% is going to be in afterlife. That's according to Islamic tradition. Knowing that gives me a great inner peace. And from the teachings of Quran again, that we have learned, repenting, accepting your fault, that is a source for inner peace. And forgiving others, for those who are not forgiving you, that's a great teachings of Christianity and also Judaism, but mostly in the Christian world, is a source of peace. Those who forgive are peaceful people, they're happy. And Quran says, if you forgive the faults of your brothers or sisters or anyone, you have a right to ask whatever they are taken from you. You can ask for justice. Yes, justice is also like a source of peace. But if you forgive them, that is better for you. Quran doesn't say it is better for them. It is better for you if you forgive, because psychologically, those who forgive have like inner peace within themselves. Giving someone else, like as a charity or sharing, there is peace in it, source of inner peace in it. So that I can go on and on from what God has taught us to me. So here is what gives me, how can I say, satisfaction. We talked about Rida. I say, I am the product of God. God has created me. So he knows the best how this machine works. He knows the best how this machine best works, meaning this machine becomes happy or satisfied. So if I do believe in him, so he also sent me like manuals and good peoples, like Moses, like Jesus, like Muhammad, peace be upon them. And they have a manuals telling us, you know what? So you have this machine. Don't put gasoline there. You work with, how can I say, water. If you have a car works with gasoline, if you put like water there, it's not going to work. This machine is not going to be happy. So this is how I see the do's and don't do's of religions, because the creator who created me sent a catalog along with it. And this is the best way to have this machine work. So to me, so therefore, obeying becomes, if you believe, if you have faith, obeying in God gives you pleasure and inner peace. And sometimes if you do not have the right result or the result that you are looking for, but you are satisfied because you did what you are asked to do, what you're supposed to do. And that is another like source of happiness. Like in short, to me, like my faith is if I have inner peace, is the source of it. So if I can forgive people today, it is because of my faith. So I should leave it over here. Thank you for the opportunity.
Recently, a couple months ago, when there were problems, especially in Pennsylvania, there was a terrible slaughter of people, innocent people there. We were invited, our group were invited to go over to the temple right off the Long Island Expressway and opposite the library. And I said, I'm going to go. I'm going to go because these things that are happening to people in the name of race is destructive. And you think we'd learn a lesson after the World War II. And we, people learned that lesson. So I went over there and I loved the service. It was mostly the Old Testament. And I think that my age went up because I have never seen a Christian service going on so long. but it had so many good things in it that it was worth listening to it and watching the people who observed it. I was going to ask Sheila to pick up on this.
Pick up on the faith journey and where you find the connection.
Well, the faith journey and Abraham's journey to find faith and keeping his faith with God who created him.
Yes, I mean, this is some of the common value, of course, throughout these three Abrahamic religions, in that, the texts, the values, the characters, whether we call them prophets or historical figures or something else, these are the same. We share the same stories. And Abraham is one of them. But, I even go back to, there's a midrash, there's a rabbinic story written to kind of embellish upon, explain more of the between the lines of the Torah text. And what it says is that primordial Adam, like the template of Adam almost, was so tall that he kept his head was in the clouds in the sky while his feet were still firmly planted on the ground. And while there are, I was thinking to my faith journey, a little bit more generalized to what other people might hold on to as part of theirs, it still is. There's so much out there in Judaism text, in every religion. But for me, this primordial Adam really has always been a role model for me, because it's the idea of being firmly planted in the ground with your head in the sky, meaning that you can be lofty, you can be creative, you can be imaginative, but you still need to be literally grounded as well. And I think that's kind of always been part of my faith journey. And for me personally, a lot of the texts have had great meaning for me. And I'm not going to read a lot of text because of the time. But I think when I was studying counseling a lot and working with teenagers more, I loved to use the model of the Israelites wandering through the desert, wandering through the wilderness, 40 years on the way from Egypt to, of course, the land of Israel. And, if it takes 40 years to get from one place to the other on the map there, then you have a really bad tour guide. Or you have people who really need to experience the journey. And so a lot of the grumbling and the questioning and even what some might call poor behavior of the Israelites at that time was really growing pains and testing boundaries and learning to think for themselves. And that, in a lot of ways, you can parallel to a teenage culture or to the maturing and growth that we all need to do throughout our lives. But sometimes there's a great spurt of it at a specific time. So I look at that as well. And there are a few other texts, of course. Another text that really helps ground me is the text from the first book of Kings, from Elijah's experience. That God told Elijah to come out, and there was a great and mighty wind, splitting mountains and shattering rocks. And then God was not in the wind, and after the wind, there was an earthquake, but the Eternal wasn't in the earthquake, and after the earthquake, fire, and you know where this is going, hopefully. And after the fire, in this translation, I'm looking at a soft murmuring sound, or sometimes we call it the still small voice. And especially we're talking about our faith journey, but we're also talking about really, where we find that internal peace. I've always used that as a model, that we're not looking for the earthquakes. We're not looking for, something to literally shake the world around us, but we're looking for that transformation within us, that when we're focused enough, when we're quiet enough, when we can really turn inwards and look for our own answers, that's the still small voice. And so that's a lot about my where I look for it. I can also say there are a couple of other passages that have really, and teachings that have really meant a lot to me. One is, sorry, one is this what we call theistic finitism. But what it really is this question of evil in the world, right? If God is all knowing, you know, God is omnipotent, God is omniscient, reverse those. If God is all powerful, all knowing, and if God is all good, or if the world is good, why do bad things happen? And, you know, this has been written by philosophers of every religion, I believe, and Harold Kushner in, you know, not why do bad things happen to good people, but when bad things happen to good people, you know, kind of brought it and gave it a modern twist. But the truth is that if we're looking for this perfect God, then that's really not a sign of humility, because if we're made in the image of God, that means that we are expecting ourselves to be perfect as well. But it's not a perfect situation. God is not all knowing and all powerful and all good. God cannot be every place. We have free will. And as long as we do, we can make a mess. And as long as there's nature, nature will act as nature. So it's not about can God fix our problems, but it's about how we use our religion and how we use our faith to get through our troubles. So, you know, one last piece, there's a tradition, again, this goes back at least 1500 years, but that we should keep 2 pieces of paper in our pockets. And on one, it should say for the whole, you know, the whole world was created for my sake. And the other should say, you know, I am but dust and ashes. And so depending how you're feeling about yourself and how your day's going, or, you know, you choose, you can pull out the one that kind of gets you back into that center land of being grounded and being realistic and being humble. And so I think that's where my faith journey has brought me, not to big ideas of grandiosity, but to the goal. It's not a perfect faith journey and it's not complete, but the goal of being centered and good and humble and doing God's work.
Matt, have we lost our moderator?
Appears we have.
It looks, is he trying to get back in? I hope so.
Nope.
Okay, well, he's trying, I hope he can get back in. Let me throw an idea out. As I've been listening to you and as we've gone through this series, again, we began with gratitude. We went to, you know, how our faith helps us to cope with COVID. We went to why we pray, and now tonight, the one theme that as I've been listening to you that came out through all of these 4 programs was that we have to get out of ourselves, and that's what our faith life does for us. Even gratitude. I mean, if I could summarize that wonderful evening when we discussed gratitude in December of 2019, it was, we're going, you know, you're grateful because you're not preoccupied with yourself. You can see yourself part of nature, or part of God's plan, or part of a community. So my question is, as I've been listening, I'm reminded of a book I read years ago by Wilson Carey McWilliams, a political scientist, and the title was The Idea of Fraternity in America. And one piece of that book stuck with me. He said, Jefferson made a terrible mistake when he drafted the Declaration of Independence. He would have been better sticking with John Locke, that we are all entitled to life, liberty, and property. But the mistake he made was he dropped property, which would have caused its own problems and has, and he substituted happiness. And he said the idea of happiness has distracted us and sent us down a road of just looking after ourselves. So in terms of peace and happiness, would you like to comment on that? Who would like to take a swing at that one? Ron, you look like you're ready to say something.
I'm thinking.
It's a very controversial thought because it's embedded in our how we define ourselves as a people.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, in so many of these polls that are taken, the American people don't come out on top as being the most happy people in the universe. I just find, and how much energy and advertising and money goes into the pursuit of being happy. So, and there is a tendency for those of us who are older to say, well, it was a happy time when we were growing up. And it wasn't necessarily at all. I think the happiness part, I don't mean to debunk it, but I think it's played up an awful lot, and we are so often left feeling flat or disappointed. And I think, again, it has to do with the failure to really take seriously, as we are today, the lives of other people and the traditions of other people. I grew up along with Ray as a person who thought there was only one way. And I don't think that's true. I think we need to have an appreciation for, and we are learning, have an appreciation for a variety of traditions. And I think that's the genius of Abraham's Table. So that's about the best that I can do, Dick.
I would say, Ron, that I've seen those surveys, and the countries that come out the happiest are the ones that have what we would call the European democratic socialist countries, where there's a greater sense of community and people are willing to pay taxes to provide services like childcare and public transportation, education from kindergarten through college. And they have a greater sense, they would say their level of happiness is higher than ours. Who else wants to jump in? Ray, while you were cut off, I asked the question, so we'll just finish up and then you can come back on.
I will.
Sheila or the Imam, would you like to comment on the American pursuit of happiness?
Yeah, actually, I would add the comment on the polls, and but if you ask like the suicide rates around the people, it comes out to the happiest countries in the world have the highest suicide rates in the world as well. So that's like the northern European countries have the highest suicide rate as well. So that's I'm not sure how can I say effective these polls are. So that's what I just.
Good point.
Yeah.
Well, it turns out that they're northern countries and they have short days in the winter and they drink too much. So there's been a correlation there.
Yeah, who knows? That's the way.
For the interruption.
Yeah, maybe that's the way they're happy. So that's I don't know.
We had the most to do with it.
Sheila, you want to jump in?
I mean, I'd add that, looking at the, looking at our secular, Declaration of Independence, it's interesting because it's kind of a bit of a false assumption, but we also remember that this is what we are all entitled to, meaning that one's pursuit of happiness, in theory, should not get in the way or diminish someone else's pursuit of happiness. And again, I'm not holding happiness up as necessarily the highest value, but also life, liberty. And these are things that we have been challenged by in the United States, despite this, grounding text. And so, what the father said is that it's not, we're not pursuing happiness. Like, we have to take a step back when we're told, we need this makeup or this clothing or this career or to drive this car. We think that's what we're pursuing, but, we are really pursuing, beauty, wealth, or status, with the falsehood that those will provide us with happiness. But I suggest that for most people who are seeking happiness in that way, it might not be long-lived for any one of those individual pursuits. So this idea of happiness is, again, it's more about, it's good to think I want to be happy, but it's not a hedonistic happy. It's not this outside force is going to just make my day and make my life and, and make me happy. I think the truth is that when we put all that aside, sure, driving a more comfortable car, or even a fun car or whatever, could add to some enjoyable time during your day or life, but at the same time, it's short-lived. And the people, I believe, who find that they've got to dig deeper are the people who will find happiness, like more as a contentment than happiness as a euphoria or as a hedonism. All is good, all is just for my pleasure. So I think there's a realistic happiness that, that's part of a realistic, go back to the term we were talking about, shalom, the shlemut, this idea of feeling whole, feeling like your life is, there are varied forces in it, there are varied relationships in it, there are varied pursuits in it, and feeling, again, some combination of wholeness, of humility, of happiness, of grounding, and perhaps of, creativity or flightiness as well, that all those come together and probably in different proportions to help each of us be the people we are. And our faiths can ground us, the values in our faith in God, the celebrations and rituals of our faith with other people. These are all things that can help bring us to that hearing the sound of that still small voice that assures us from within that all is good.
The author I cited, the title of his book is The Idea of Fraternity in America. And he makes the point you made, Sheila, that our pursuit of individual happiness has broken the ties we have with one another, and that this is one of the problems we have as Americans. So Ray, we've been talking about happiness and connectedness while you were gone, so you're back. And I yield back to you.
Okay. Well, when I was preparing, I thought about this, and I guess you people went into it. You went into the Declaration of Independence?
We did, yes.
So
Just ask them that one.
do you believe that your faith communities have reached their members with a message that has enabled them to move forward during these troubling times?
Tough question.
Is your faith community successful in reaching its members?
Well, I would just acknowledge that our membership is diminishing and has been for a good period of time. And that was before COVID. It's part of the truth of religion in America, that it isn't just Catholicism. Indeed, there are some congregations that are prospering in the sense of increased membership, but the traditional religions, I think, are experiencing diminished numbers. By the same token, I just would suggest that from a Catholic point of view, I think there was a lot of arrogance on a part of a person like myself, just thinking that it has to do with numbers and pride of place, and our Pope, our spiritual leader, temporal leader in the sense of on this earth, has given a comeuppance to leadership. He's told us that we've been arrogant, that we've been not servants, and it's a good. I mean, I think he's done a heck of a job in being very truthful and honest with us. I mean, and finally, I'd say he talks a lot about the poor, and I think he includes in that a poor church. I don't mean poor me, but a church that's humble. And we were not, in many instances, we were not that at all. So I think this is a good time. I know for myself, this June I will be 60 years a priest. So good times, bad times, whatnot. But I think this is a good time. And I'm grateful to God for the challenges that we're faced with. And so maybe I'll just leave it at that.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of bases. And if anyone wants to end with a short conclusion, go ahead.
Right, if I could just jump in, the imam and the rabbi might want to answer your question. It was a very good one about whether our faiths have provided us with a way of coping. We only heard from Father Ron.
Oh, good answer. Good.
In the way of what?
Imam or Rabbi, want to answer that?
Yeah, I can say a couple of things. I think the question was like whether or not our like religious institution were able to reach to the community as much as we wanted to. Was that the question, or?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, so I'm not sure. I really hope so. And like the means of reaching out to the community for like the Muslims, and also like it works out the same for like our Jewish traditions. Like Friday gatherings are not there anymore. Saturday gatherings are not there, and Sunday church gatherings are not there anymore. But like somehow I think people were able to reach out to each other. So, but I do not have any measurement to say that it has been reached out perfectly. So I cannot say that. I'm sorry.
All right. It's probably your connection to the hospital limits your ability to see the people a little bit.
Yeah. That became my community. Yeah, you're right. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And Sheila, to your community?
You know, I'm not at this time serving a congregation, and, you know, to speak for my personal congregation that, you know, my family affiliates with, and just in Judaism in general, I mean, there's such a range that some people have adapted very well. And okay, if the best we can do is services that are streaming, we're going to be there for services that are streaming. And I've heard from people like, you know, Friday night, our Shabbat or Sabbath evening is like the highlight of their week when they sit down in front of the streaming screen and feel like they're part of the community and see familiar faces on Zoom. And, you know, that's what's kept them together. That's what's kept them, you know, held them together through the week, that this is something they look forward to, and it is a connection. And others, and I think sometimes, especially some children, are feeling very disconnected at this time, and we're going to have to make up for it. I mean, like everything else, we're doing the best we can in, you know, a once in a century happening. We hope it's once in a century. And so, we're going to have to make up for that. We're going to have to work really hard to reconnect. And it's, again, for some people, it hasn't been a problem. For others, it has. And there are other pieces, like our religious institutions need to be supported. And so when we talk about membership being down, which has affected many religious institutions of many faiths, that's hurting as far as where people are able to support and where people are prioritizing. And so we're going to have to work at that as well, because we need religious institutions, in my opinion. And that's something that we're going to have to bring back, and people are itching and talking now, and I see the B'nai mitzvah, bar mitzvah, when you used to have every extended relative there, everyone who was at anyone else's bar mitzvah in your family, and you reconnected with all of the first or second or third cousins, and that was family and ritual and Jewish community. And now they're limited to, if they're in person at all, they're limited to 20 people. Or, for anyone who's tried to attend a religious service or a religious milestone, life cycle celebration, it can be hard to find the same level of meaning and connection. And hopefully that's going to tell people it's something they've been missing, and they want even more, and they want to support those institutions, and it's something they want back in their lives. That's my hope. And, and as a member of a family and parent of a child, and daughter of my senior parents, I want to be with my family in those religious settings as well. That's my connection to my childhood, and my connection to my kid's connection to his future. So I very much personally look forward to that, because I wouldn't be a clergy person now if it hadn't had meaning for me in the past. So again, I hope that more people find meaning and seek that meaning, and realize, if for them it's been missing, that it's something they want back.
When I speak to a lot of public school teachers that I meet, who are relatives or not, they are kind of depressed. They kind of say the students don't respond the way they should respond, and they don't know what to do, especially with this year. That really cut into their connection to their students. At least it tells us we shouldn't repeat anything like that again. Students don't like it. Yeah, they can't respond to that. I think eventually workers won't like it. There's something about getting together and being with a group that works.
And I would say there's repair to be done. Like, one of the values in Judaism is tikkun olam, which literally means like repairing the world. And there's repair to be done. I have a kid in my house who's been in school every day this year. He is very fortunate, and we are very fortunate. But he doesn't know how to play games with kids anymore, because they're not allowed to touch the same things or play with a ball outside at recess. He doesn't know how to interact with kids younger and older, because he only gets to play with the kids who are in his classroom the entire day, indoors or outdoors. We're doing the best we can. This has been, we have saved lives by doing these things, by taking these measures in schools and hospitals and everything else, but it has not been without challenge. And the imam, I don't know how long you've been at Children's Hospital, but, we see kids who have been in hospitals with horrible illnesses, who lose a year of their lives.
Yeah.
They're a year older.
For 3 years.
What? Yeah. So you've probably seen these children who, if they're lucky, get to.
They're living in the hospital. Yes.
And that's what many of our lives have been. We've lost a year, and I don't know, people always say, oh, that's such a good age or a bad age about children or adults or whatever. There's no good age for a child or an adult, but especially a child to lose a normal year of life.
Yeah.
And we are now going to have a generation that we're going to have to work really, really hard, but all the more so that we'll have our religious institutions, we'll have our faith, we'll have those things that help keep us grounded and connected to family and centered. So as the world opens up for them, we're going to help teach them again what the greatest valued things are, and show them so they can choose what their own values are, of course. But we're going to teach them how to have play dates again, and we're going to teach them how to interact and how to hug their friends and how to play Foursquare and hopscotch. And the world will repair. It'll be a new world. It'll be different. We will be more cautious in some ways. But, I think that level of hope, just, you got to have it, because if not, why bother? We got to think we can turn this world around, not just vaccinating people, but helping heal people in communities and families.
Ron, one quick ending.
I'm fascinated by what Rabbi Sheila had to say, and I think we'll come out of this hopefully better people. I don't have kids, and that would have been a nice thing, but that wasn't in the cards for us. But they're crucial. We need to get out of this funk, and kids need kids, and parents need a great deal of support. So and I'm not going to be around probably, but in any event, I think I feel so hopeful. I guess getting that second shot in my arm just it was amen.
Well, I think the structure of suburbia on Long Island and the other suburbias throughout the United States challenges us to bring families and children together. I think the way it's set up, it's you have to have a car. I can't go here. That's why a place like the Jewish Center is a very good place, where some of the kids are enrolled and they can do things there and they can meet other kids. I think that probably centers from different religions might be one thing to do. That's just a guess. And so I'd like to conclude with the words that I had garnered last week and told you about. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, and that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And so our founding fathers believed that internal peace and happiness was in the hands of the Creator. And therefore, we don't have to fear. We will ultimately prevail. Thank you.
Thank you.
You.
Thank you all for coming to this program, and for special thanks to our panel. You folks were wonderful, and despite our technical problems, really very profound, very profound. And again, when I look at the 4 programs dealing with this awful year we had, the leitmotif, the theme that comes out is get out of yourself and serve others, be with others. Ron, I'm a great admirer of Pope Francis, and I don't think it was coincidence that in the middle of COVID, he issued his encyclical Fratelli Tutti. We are all brothers and sisters. So let's end with that. We will be back with another program. Our committee is meeting tomorrow, so watch for the announcements. And we're always grateful for your participation. And again, thanks to the panel. You guys are wonderful. And Ray, thank you for moderating.
Thank you.
Thank
Be
you
peaceful
all.
and happy, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.